Collins, we've got some 70-degree days going on, but rain and possible snow is not out of our future yet. We had some snow, actually some accumulation, not necessarily on streets and sidewalks, which is one of my favorite things about spring snows, is you get the snow, but generally, unless it's a foot or 2 foot, you're going to be clear on the sidewalks and roads because there's so much heat that's caught in those that concrete and asphalt that it melts off pretty quick. But we're seeing some 70-degree days this week, and excited for kind of more consistent warm weather to come. Hopefully we can avoid some windy weather, but you never know with spring. This Saturday is supposed to possibly rain again, which is kind of a bummer. My brother-in-law and I are coaching in Windsor, our kiddos, and I'm also coaching my daughter, which is a lot. So I'm coaching 3 nights a week in Windsor, which is about 20-minute drive from my house to Eastman Park, and having to do that for 3 days a week. And I have not yet been able to coach in a game. It's super frustrating because 2 weekends ago I was in Vegas, and this last weekend they canceled it. So hopefully sooner than later, I'll actually be able to coach a game and get to cheer my kiddos on that way. But we are live in Fort Collins. We're going to talk to you guys a lot about what's happening in Fort Collins, city council, things to do, situations that are, kind of to keep focus on. But, probably one of the main things that's going around Fort Collins right now is this discussion about demographics in Fort Collins and possibly the redistribution, the consolidation of schools. And, there's so many different scenarios. There's listening sessions that are going on that are very heavily attended. And it seems like very much so that everyone has their fingers on the pulse. Like Timnath is passed a resolution saying that we want to keep Timnath kids in Timnath schools, because one of the things that is proposed on one of the scenarios is that Timnath Middle High School, which is basically already at capacity, become just a high school. And that would mean those middle schoolers that are living in Timnath would then be going to Preston or other schools, and would be a decent bit of a drive for some of those parents. But, the Timnath City Council, Timnath Town Council is passed a resolution. Larimer County residents are pushing on John Kafalis, the commissioner, to say, hey, we got to push to have people on the north side of town keep CLP open. And I've got a friend who's a teacher at Lincoln, and he's like, man, if CLP closes and they consolidate students, the middle schoolers, into Lincoln, it is going to be bursting at the seams. And I know that they're not excited for that. And that's definitely one thing, really, until June, I believe it's June 11th, are going to be really front runner as far as topics and conversations and up for debate. But, there are going to be some tough decisions that the Poudre School kind of steering committee are going to have to make. And no matter what, not everyone and probably a lot of people aren't going to be happy. My family could be impacted. Werner, I read on Reddit, which is absolutely not a reliable source, but Gossipville, and on Reddit, they said Werner is up there as far as a possibility of being consolidated. There's some Paragon Point, Brittany Knolls, Huntington Hills, Fossil Creek Meadows, and Miramont, Southridge Greens, all feed into Werner. And yeah, there's some price points of those homes that make it a little bit harder for younger families to afford to buy in there. So some of the numbers at Werner aren't what they used to be. When I grew up in Fort Collins, Werner was a very heavily attended school. Lots of my friends went to Werner, and but now, there's lots of school of choice. We have a client that moved here from California that actually lives in the Thompson Valley School District, but can school of choice and did school of choice their kiddo into Werner. And school of choice is very possible and open right now. But these consolidations and kind of redrawings and how all this works out will definitely be something that we watch in the coming weeks. Which, with growth, and specifically this intersection, it started kind of the work last week. They got in trouble, actually got slapped on the wrist for not handling prairie dogs appropriately. And I think one thing I probably get a little bit of kickback, pushback on this channel for is I love animals. I just, and I think the handling of them is very important. But in this article, it suggested that the developer had to pay $11,000 to basically make up for the not going through the proper process of handling this prairie dog colony. And now $11,000 is a lot, but what would it have cost them if they did go through the right procedures, both in time and money? And as a developer, is it worth kind of pushing and asking for forgiveness later? I don't know. $11,000 is a lot, but depending on time, what the fees would have cost, what they would have charged you in the first place, I wonder, how big of a delta that would have been for them to save. But we are going to see that intersection that has needed a ton of help, because I will say we used to pick up our kids from daycare at Registry Ridge on the west side of town and have to come back up that way, kind of at rush hour traffic. And you would potentially sit at that light for one or two different red lights. And it's a single lane going east and west, and then obviously College Avenue going north and south. But they are going to be it's a $12 million project, and they will be working on that now, pretty much starting last week. And it'll be finished in early 2025. There's lots of different work that has to be done, retaining walls, widening, moving of utilities, and then the actual infrastructure. So by no means is it going to be shut down for the next 8 to 10 months, but you will see a significant amount of work at College and Trilby, which is an intersection that has needed love for many years and is finally getting it. So while yes, it's going to be a headache for the next year, I remember when College and Horsetooth was getting this huge renovation and, figuring out the right turn lanes, left turn lanes, adding a left turn lane. And that intersection, it runs extremely smoothly now, and it is set up for success now and into the future. But it took a long time. I remember that intersection getting worked on for, it felt like a year, and it probably was. But the Holiday Drive Theater, Holiday Drive Drive-In Theater opened up this last weekend. It's currently only open up on Friday and Saturday nights until Memorial Day, and at which time they'll be open up, I believe it's 6 or 7 days a week. And if you haven't visited the Holiday Twin Drive-In, definitely do that. It is a super fun time. Their concession stands are great. Serve, alcohol if you want that. But it's pretty cheap, pretty affordable, super fun for kids to get out there, watch movies outside. But that's open and rocking for this year. So go check out Holiday Twin Drive-In. City council meeting we're going to get to here shortly, but a huge thing massive that happened in Fort Collins or Colorado, the state of Colorado's real estate, is the governor signed into effect the Fort Collins U+2 rule. Well, I should say it's a statute that bans familial status engineering for housing restrictions. And essentially Fort Collins has a U+2 rule. There's different areas that have me+3, or, Boulder just got rid of their U+2 rule, I think a year ago or so. But essentially across the state no longer allows you to limit occupants based off of familial status. And it has to then be based off of more building code, which essentially, allows there to be infinity people to move there. Now, and the reason I say that is because the practicality of how you can limit based off of building code would mean you have to have the floor plan of the property and then almost voluntary compliance to provide that to you, and then knowing what that area's building code is and maintenance codes are. But there's so many different games that can be played. So these municipalities are going to rely heavily on nuisance law. So if there's noise, trash, rubbish, those are going to be what is going to be the strong arm of those municipalities to enforce kind of potential issues. But this is huge because it does open up a ton of potentially open bedrooms across the Fort Collins, city of Fort Collins. Now, that's not to say that there's been tons of people who are already, breaking those laws. But in the development review, there was a request for additional occupancy. You actually had to go through the planning and zoning. If you had a 5-bedroom house in Fort Collins and you lived in, let's just say, kind of a student rental area, you technically could only rent out to really 3 of those bedrooms and left 2 of those bedrooms unused. But if you wanted to, and you had substantial enough parking and trash, kind of systems in place, you could go through planning and zoning and get an additional extra occupancy use for your building so that you could then rent out those other 2 bedrooms. Now, thousands of dollars in time and headache and annoyance. But plenty of people have done that, and I'd be very frustrated if I was those individuals, because now all of a sudden, as of July, the U+2 is going to be gone, and there's going to potentially be some softening of rents. Because let's just say I was charging $2,200 a month for a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, but could only rent it out to 3 people, and so each one of those individuals are going to be paying, close to $800 per bedroom. Now, if I can legally rent out that 4th bedroom, well, it's going to drop that rental rate to closer to, what is that? $550 per bedroom, roughly, right around there. So they're going to be saving $250 a month per person in rent to be able to rent out that 4th bedroom. So the theory is that it's going to save money for rents in Fort Collins. Now, what actually happens will be interesting to see, because I think there will be landlords that will say, hey, I was getting $800 per bedroom, and now I can rent out the 4th bedroom. So instead of $2,200 a month, 8, 16, 24, there's bad math there, sorry. But if I could rent it out for $800 per bedroom, instead of $2,400 a month in rent, I'm going to go ahead and go get $3,200 a month rent, because we've seen that people are able and willing to pay $800 per bedroom. So you're going to have this mix, but I think the market will obviously adjust itself and allow for, maybe those prime rentals to still get $800 per bedroom, but maybe the less prime to have that $2,400 a month in rent just distributed evenly between 4 people. I did adjust between $2,200 to $2,400 because I realized my math was wrong. So I apologize for that. But that is huge. And the city council, this is what they're going to ultimately rely on, from my perspective, moving forward, implementing the foundational land use code, which I'm calling just land use code 3.0, because this is kind of the 3rd go around. But and we'll get to this shortly, but they basically just wiped away everything that was contentious and said, hey, we'll let the state deal with it. And the state is absolutely doing that right now in the state of Colorado, getting rid of U+2, which was literally on our kind of agenda as a community to address in March, April, May of this year. And now we don't need to as a city council. And they're kind of like cheering this on quietly because they don't want to be too loud about it. But there's one loud opponent of that, Kelly Olson, who initially was a part of kind of the foundation of U+2 to save neighborhoods and livability, all that kind of stuff. But there's others that are like, hey, we need to offset some housing cost burdens on individuals. And this is one of the ways, one of our tools, one of our levers to do that. So we will see what happens there. But I did a reel today about Fort Collins being one of the hottest housing markets, the housing market index. Denver was number 1. Now, this was as of February, so I don't think there's been anything recent from U.S. news. But Denver was number 1. There was a lot of North Carolina, a lot of Texas on there. Fort Collins was 12, Greeley 15, and Colorado Springs number 19. And it is a discussion about how strong Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, the Front Range is as far as real estate goes. And recently we were ranked by, I believe it was USA Today ranked Fort Collins the number 4 best beer city in the United States a few months back. And then as of just a couple weeks ago, now we are ranked as the number 4 best public town square in the United States. Now, I've never been to Detroit, but I believe Detroit came in number 1. Possibly population swayed that vote. So obviously these are all subjective, because you could have voted every single day and had a contingent of 2,000 people pay to just vote every day and make those adjustments, especially in a large community like a large city like Detroit. But Fort Collins comes in number 4. That's on a list. Again, a lot of individuals do research, find Fort Collins across all these different lists. And I will say all of that does is just show the strength of and desire of living in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado. So I don't see prices softening, and if anything, remaining pretty strong. But I worked in Old Town Square for nearly a decade. I oversaw Old Town Square for 6 years, managed all those buildings, operated leases, really was in tune with Outreach Fort Collins, Downtown Development Authority, a lot of different organizations. And it is truly a beautiful place. The development of Linden Street, all of the alleyways, art in public places, pianos around town. The list goes on about what makes Fort Collins special, and definitely have voted for it because I think it's deserving of being one of the best town squares in the United States. If you haven't visited Fort Collins, and if you do, if you're planning on it, go check out Old Town Square. It's a pretty special place. All right, now getting into the city council meeting. There was 2 main items: Land Use Code 3.0, and I'll share my screen so you guys can kind of see this. But it was Land Use Code, and if you're on Instagram, feel free to jump on YouTube. You can kind of see what I'm going to be talking about, but I'm going to share my screen. Because Land Use Code 3.0, foundational land use code, whatever you want to call it, essentially is watered down even more. Quick history. There was 1997 Land Use Code. They were going up for revision changes. The Land Development Code in 2022 got passed. It was a significant overhaul, like no neighborhood meetings, expedited review processes, ADUs across across Fort Collins, duplexes across Fort Collins, triplexes with specific parameters and density, lowering parking spots. I mean, it was an aggressive land development code change that could have potentially, per some of the numbers, increased the supply of housing by 52% in Fort Collins. A lot of that is kind of around their transit-oriented development zones, TODs, and downtown, increasing density, building heights, decreasing lot sizes. And there was a group called Preserve Fort Collins that said, whoa, no, this is crazy. You're saying that I could build a duplex next door? I've lived here for 25 years, and there's no way that a duplex should be next door. There's no garage space for it. I mean, those streets are going to be covered. And they built a contingency and fought it and appealed it and won. Sent it back to city council. City council said, no, we're not going to send it to the voters. We're going to repeal and then refresh and put it back out in front of the voters, or put it back out for vote again. So the Land Use Code 2.0, I don't know if that had a name, came out in 2023. And it got watered down, but they were still saying, all right, ADUs can be in pretty much any zone, any RL, residential low density, that's RL, and still decrease of lot size requirements and density, but they really pared it back a lot. Like no more triplexes. I think they decreased the density and a lot. It was quite a bit watered down. I did pay attention to it, but I didn't pay attention to it that much because it very much felt like it was going to get voted on and repealed again. And that's exactly what happened. Got voted on and repealed again. And so here we are at the foundational land use code 3.0, and they're changing some words, NCM, NCL, LMN, so neighborhood conservation, low density, neighborhood conservation, medium density, low density mixed use neighborhoods. Those are kind of the ones that got into OTA, Old Town District A, OTB, and OTC. And they removed 9 areas from Land Use Code 2.0. And here's what they did. Basically removed ADUs from all zones. Removed duplexes from OTA as a housing type. There was an OTB, they were going to allow you to go up to 6 units, but now it's maintaining the current 4 units. And then a big thing too, in the original land development code and then also the land use code was they were going to basically overrule all HOAs, saying, hey, HOAs, you can't tell this citizen that lives in Fort Collins that they can't build an ADU on their place. Even though your HOA explicitly says no, and those are the governing documents, the bylaws, the common interest community documents, the covenants, all of these things that we had to sign and are legally binding when we bought this house. No. You can't enforce these. We are going to overrule you. Well, Land Use Code 2.0, I believe, still fought against that. And now in Land Use Code 3.0, the foundational Land Use Code says, no, HOAs do get to dictate what they are going to allow and all of this good stuff in our development. So essentially, from my perspective, the Land Use Code 3.0 foundational land use code is kind of a nothing burger, changes some names, cleans up the document. I think the original land use code book was like how many hundreds of pages, and now it's going to be much shorter, but still like 400 pages. Easier to use, pictures, flows that make more sense. They are cleaning up a lot of the verbiage so that people, if they want to develop, redevelop, developers can understand it very easily, what that process looks like, what that process is, which we're going to talk about the Union Park development here shortly, which is super interesting, just to make it a little bit more user-friendly. And in the background, there's this notion from the city councilors that, hey, Governor Polis is very adamant about addressing head-on the housing crisis, which is in Colorado. And one of the tools, one of the levers he's used is the U+2. Another one is possible of ADUs within specific MSAs. I can't remember what MSA means right now. Metro area, statistical area, something like that. Big cities. Anyways, within certain MSAs, towns, communities, municipalities saying, hey, if your city is this big, you have to allow your citizens to build an ADU on their property. And city council is like, hey, we're going to let Colorado be the bad guys, and we won't be, because no one's going to appeal Colorado if it ultimately gets passed. And that's going to be on the docket and on discussion here moving forward. And so City of Fort Collins city council members like, hey, we'll back off. We're tired of being the bad guy. We're going to pass some changes. Which all three of the things that were voted on were passed 6-1, 7-0, 7-0. And that's on first reading. Second reading will be in May. Second reading May 7th, as you see here. And it's important for City of Fort Collins to kind of get through this because the phase 2 of the development land use code overhaul is the commercial side. And that's kind of been on the back burner since 2022, and this not ultimately getting passed, which will help our commercial land use developers either A, develop more, or B, height, whatever that all is, who knows. But that's been on pause for really the last 3 years. And that needs to begin. And so city council members like, hey, we'll sit back, like state of Colorado be the bad guys. They're going to pass things like U+2 banning the U+2 rules, possibly ADUs, and who knows what else. But that's possibly going to be happening. Now, speaking of development, the second part of city council meeting was an appeal process for the Union Park development. This is the development that is going to be going on between Harmony and Horsetooth off of Ziegler on the west side of Ziegler, between the Front Range Village Shopping Center and English Ranch. And super interesting dynamics going on there because you had an appeal so you have the ODP and the PDP, overall development plan, project development plan. And the way that I'm seeing it and understand it, overall development plan is if there's multiple phases to the development plan, and then the PDP is for that individual phase. And the ODP was approved, passed, and the appeal timeline passed for that back last September of 2023. But the PDP got implemented early this year. There's been an appeal for that, but it seems like it's a kind of a daunting. I mean, I'm in this every day, and I will tell you what, talk about like clear as mud And I don't envy anybody who goes through the development process or the appeals process, because there's rules and guidelines that you have to play by. And if you don't, well, you're kind of shit out of luck. And that's kind of how it felt. Was this individual was really wanting to appeal the ODP, which was passed last September, and the 14-day appeal process went by. But the PDP that they were wanting to appeal really wasn't applicable to what they were fighting, which was this connecting street and stoplight, which was between Woodland Park Estates and English Ranch. And anyways, long story short, Landmark Homes, which is the developer of this, or would-be developer of this, is all the while sitting in the background for the last year, waiting for this to happen, while accumulating holding costs of whether it's loans, property taxes, insurance, having to pay for attorneys and, drawings. And I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why I probably will never get involved with development. Maybe I'll do a few small houses, single family, onesie twosies, small developments, but shoot, a development at this size, there's just so many risks. And that's not even saying that there's a shovel in the ground yet. And by the time that these units get delivered, by the time that this process is started to the time that they deliver the first unit, we're talking years, and the market can absolutely shift. Let's just say when they started this development back in 2021, 2022, interest rates were down in the high 3s, low 4s. Well, they're 7.5% right now, which does put a pressure on today's buyer. And where they maybe could have sold $450,000 condos all day long, well, maybe there's a little bit of pushback now buying and selling those condos. So talk about risk. Landmark is still very excited about doing this. The development on Ziegler and between Horsetooth and Harmony is absolutely going to happen. It's just a matter of when. But the resident for English Ranch definitely threatened district court, which I have no idea what that process looks like, but he suggested $70,000 to put it in front of district court. How would you like, being those residents, possibly, building a GoFundMe or a community drive? But man, even at the 500 individuals they said that had signed the appeal or protest, 500, $70,000 divided by 500. That's still, it's a pretty penny for everyone to drop for something that might not go through. So maybe it goes to district court, maybe it doesn't, maybe they find a backer. I mean, so many different things that could happen. But long story short, city council upheld planning and zoning's ruling, both that they followed the guidelines and they, did what they needed to do, both 7-0. So now the plan is going to continue to move forward. I believe the next step would be fighting it, moving it to district court. So we will see what happens, because the sanctuary at the Greens has gone through all this process. And I mean, talk about being a difficult time being a developer in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado. And if one of the issues we're trying to tackle is housing supply, having a 3 to 4 year time horizon and these fights and money and all that kind of stuff, I'm not saying that we should just expedite all developments, but man, it would just be really difficult time being Landmark Homes right now. So we'll see where they go moving forward from here. But we have got, some fun things to do in Fort Collins moving forward. April 28th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It is Kids in the Park at Twin Silo Park. There's going to be music and dancing and food trucks. Food trucks are back. They've never gone anywhere, but food trucks are back. They're going to be coming during weeks and weekends, but between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., go check out Twin Silo Park with your kiddo. NoCo line dancing at New Belgium Brewing twice a month on the lawn, 5:30 to 7 p.m. Let's see here. Pickleball Expo. Dude, does anyone play pickleball? I've played once, and let me know if you like playing pickleball or enjoy it. City of Fort Collins is going through a $40,000 feasibility study right now, and they're going to decide where they can put pickleball courts, because one of the big issues with pickleball is the sound, and pickleball has lost all of its meaning to me right now because I've said pickleball like 10 different times. So anyways, a pickleball expo at Osborne Park April 27th, 8:30 to 2 p.m. It's free, but you do need to register. So if you're interested in getting involved, go watch, go go join that, learn about, I guess it's called the kitchen and different things about pickleball. And if it's for you and if you want to try it. And finally, Horse and Dragon tonight, 7 to 8:30 p.m. They're going to be talking about the bees, butterflies, and more, and kind of it's Earth Day. So trying to educate people about how all of this stuff works together. And we're super excited because actually the founders of Horse and Dragon agreed to be on the podcast, Fort Collins Fellows, and that'll come out here in a couple of months. We've got some great guests coming up. Chief Jeff Swoboda, Fort Collins Police, Kelly DiMartino, this Fort Collins City Manager, just awesome guests. We're working on a really fun lineup for you. And Fort Collins Fellows has phenomenal information about Fort Collins from the experts' mouths themselves. So if you haven't listened to that, I definitely recommend going and listen to Fort Collins Fellows if you're wanting to learn more about Fort Collins. That is it for today's live in Fort Collins, this week's live in Fort Collins, where we come to you every Monday at 12 p.m. Great information about Fort Collins. If I do say so myself, it's teaching me a lot more about my community, getting involved, understanding, learning what's going on, and hopefully it's just fractionally helpful to you and your decision making. And if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We just jumped off a phone call with somebody who had been watching the show for a while, watching a lot of the videos, and it's really fun to have those conversations because people are so excited about Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, and the Front Range that we just could be a small part of that. So I appreciate you guys joining on a weekly basis, and until next time, you guys have a great day.